and this is what I don't understand, like a complete stranger went out of his way to go to my website to leave me hate mail. Like, you should be doing something else with your time, right? Like there's so many other things you could be doing than yelling at someone you don't know. And it was something like it was the standard that, like, who do I think I am to have a podcast, because all I've ever done is shoot porn, so therefore anything else I do is invalid.
Having spent over 10 years in the adult industry and acquiring a degree in psychology, Candice Horvax is a free-spirited thinker and serial entrepreneur. She's a fellow podcaster, is a brand new mom, and today she has come to chat with me on just A Convo. And so with that said, I'd say a big welcome and thank you for wanting to be here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And it's funny because when I was reading up on you, you've done a lot. You've done everything between the sky and earth. So I want to know, in your own words, who would you say you are and what do you do?
Oh man, I feel like that's such a loaded question when someone asks like who you are, because you're like, well, do I give them, you know, the philosophical question and get into like the whole spiritual of like who am I compared to like my ego, and then you can spend like an hour trying to like deconstruct that. But I would say, to simplify it, I'm a very curious person. Would like to consider myself a very independent person, very free thinking, very open-minded, compassionate, friendly. I'm obviously a new mom. That's a huge part of my life. I'm a wife. That's another huge pillar of my life. And then a bit of an entrepreneur, where that I'm just trying to still find my footing a little bit. So I'm obviously like an influencer, or so, you know, like public persona, if you will, but I'm launching an e-commerce company right now that's hopefully going to be off the ground before the end of the year, but we'll kind of see with everything going on and factories closing and all of that, how that's going to work out. I just launched a podcast, which is really interesting. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to like discover like the new entrepreneurial side of myself, but I would say, to sum it up, yeah, those are like the main pillars of who Candice is.
Right. Yeah, it's like you say, it's funny whenever I ask someone that, it's very interesting to me to listen to what the person decides to mention about themselves, because like you say, you could do your professional part of who you are, and you can do your personal part of who you are. Like you said, you're a free thinker, you're a, like, this is me inside, and then there's the me outside to the outside. And yeah, it's very interesting what whenever I ask someone that, what they decide to say. And so with that said, with the whole summarization of who you are, I'm gonna jump straight into it, because like I mentioned in the very beginning, you spent over 10 years, or maybe exactly 10 years in the adult industry, and I want to know, because that's obviously a very, or can be at least, a controversial business, and a special business to be in. So if we get to the start of things, and why did you decide to, or what made you end up in that industry to start with?
So I've always been very curious about sexuality. I feel like I was very shy growing up, like super shy. I had kind of the same boyfriend from like 13 to 19 on and off. And I never had that confidence to kind of explore who I was sexually, I guess, or like where that certain kind of confidence, especially as a woman, comes from when you explore and understand that sexuality. So I kind of always shied away from it. My mom was very outwardly sexy. Like, she dressed very provocatively. She, you know, had lots of boyfriends that she went through. She did modeling for a while that was also kind of suggestive. So I think going through that whole rebellious stage, as like every, teenager does, they're like, I'm going to be the opposite of my role models. So I never really leaned into it. And then once I moved out, went to university, broke up with the boyfriend, I started to say, like, who am I? What's important to me? What do I want to like kind of discover about myself? And I still had that draw towards sexuality. It's just like this indescribable pull. I guess anyone who's like felt like they were supposed to do something or explore something would maybe understand, but just like a need to go see what that was about. So I stopped ignoring it. I reached out to a couple of companies. I had no idea about the process. I sent them photos. I was like, do you audition? Like, what is this about? Like, I have no idea what's real and what's, staged in the process, how professional this is. I was really lucky in the sense that the first companies I shot for were really reputable. So I had a really great first experience. And I loved being on set. I loved the scripts. I loved the attention. I know you're not supposed to say that, but it's true. So I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And my scenes ended up being like some of the most popular of like all time, like out of the gate. And I was like, okay, this is something I'm supposed to explore. So I kind of stayed in the industry for, I don't know, I'd say like about like 8 years before I started like self-producing, maybe closer to 10. And I just mostly went contract to contract between really big companies. And there was like small periods where I would freelance, but I would say overall it was a great experience, but like any industry, right, there's, positives and negatives that come with that. So it's a very complicated industry, and my experience was definitely like a mix of good and bad, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, I can imagine there's, like you said, definitely good and bad sides to it. I'm sure there's, I mean, I don't actually know, but I'm sure there's a lot of money involved.
Surprisingly, no. So
really?
The thing is, I was just talking to one of my girlfriends who's also been in for a really long time, and we were both saying that the girls that tend to be in the top, like in the world, right? Like she's definitely one of them. They go in because of like these other reasons. Like it's not to be famous and it's not for money. Like they go in purely to kind of explore their sexuality, and that tends to translate well. And then you end up getting success like inadvertently through that. The girls that go in just for the money end up being very disappointed, because unless you're in that top, 5-10%, it's like pretty much average income. I think the last time I checked in the US, it was like 50,000 is like the average income. And the problem is when you get girls that go in so young, because you can be 18, which I think is problematic, but you're allowed to get in at 18. A lot of them, it might be their first time working. So like you don't have your taxes deducted like you would at a normal job because you're a freelancer. So they leave home, they leave set with, like, let's say $600 for the day, and they think they made $600. So rather than saving, like that 25-30% for taxes at the end of the year, they end up getting stuck with a bill that they can't pay. And then that ends up being this negative cycle of constantly trying to chase the tax or your tax bill, which is never good. So unfortunately, a lot of girls, especially the younger ones that get in, end up leaving with less money than they started.
Really? That's really surprising to hear. I thought there was like millions and millions.
There can be, but it's very, very rare, like extremely rare.
Right. And so you going into this, you had no idea how the process was, and but once you're actually in and you're chosen and you're about to be paid as a model, how is the first actual scene? Like what is it like going to set one day, first day?
Oh man. So I actually started with just doing girl scenes because that was what I was comfortable with. I wasn't ready to dive into the more extreme types of scenes. So the girl that I worked with for my very first one was this huge name, like total superstar in the industry. I watched her stuff forever. I just thought she was amazing. So I was like, well, do you have any tips? I was a nervous wreck, like trembling, super scared. Again, like I'm a very shy person. I didn't really know anything. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I was asking for just any advice from someone who's been there. And she was just so cold, didn't really talk to me the whole day, ignored all my texts, probably was just like, I have no time for this person. So it was very nerve-wracking, and I kind of just had to find my own way and just like go with what felt right at the time, because I had unfortunately like no role models. But you show up and there's giant wardrobes, and they test a bunch of stuff on you for the day, and then you have hair and makeup, which takes about like, you know, hour, 2 hours. Then you drive to the location. They set up everything like props, decor, whatever, and then there's probably a crew of like 5 to, you know, the biggest crew I've probably been on is like maybe 30 people, 50 people. So they can be super small or super large. And then usually a regular shoot day is like 4 to 5 hours, which is crazy for like one scene that's online, but 4 to 5 hours. And then the longer days are like, I think the longest I've been on set is like 17 hours. When we did like, you know, we did a Kill Bill parody that took forever, and we did like a John Wick thing. So it depends. Like there's a very large spectrum of like how your day can go on set.